I started coding more than 40 years ago. I'm one of the Sinclair Spectrum kids at that time. Then later, coding became a way to make money. Just before going to the university, the little weekend jobs were about coding. Then I graduated in computer science and started a profession in that field. A few years later, I started my own company. So I joined the business side. Now I'm paying developers to write software for me. I still open the IDE for kind of a meditation style, and yeah, that's more or less the story. Then I also ended up in the first agile consulting, and then large-scale modeling facilitation. That was not exactly my traditional stuff, but then it became interesting. More than 10 years ago now, this idea of EventStorming popped out. That is the original blog post, and the date is actually November 18, 2013. Also, the platform is now kind of outdated, but I still kept it. But the original article is telling an original story, which is not the story I would like to tell today. So in 2013, first blog post, the original idea was to get in one single workshop from business to aggregate discovery, and still it worked in some places, but then the more we moved to maturity, we discovered a few other things. So 2019, the more or less midway of the EventStorming evolution. The book was in the making. I had a community of practitioners idea, but it also split the format into three different recipes: big picture, process modeling, and software design. But we also had chances to play it in very different scenarios, from corporate retrospective to induction of new hires, designing startups, modeling critical processes, redesigning architectures, and many, many different opportunities. People ask me to do something that I've never done before. I was warning them, like, I've never done that, but I'm happy to try. And yes, that was great. Then, of course, everybody had this little problem in 2020, and everybody was forced to deal with remote. I already had discussion about remote before this, and my discussion were something like, get a plane ticket, you cannot do it remotely, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I had to rethink some of this constraint, because in 2020, we didn't even know if we could ever get back to normality, or what was the actual concept of normality. Put in another way, the very idea of putting all the key people in the same room was illegal at that time. And most of our businesses that were running conferences, workshop, and training classes, and even events, and so on, well, that's not possible anymore. And so we had a lot of free time to reinvent and rethink the whole story. So, well, let's spice up our Miro license and get things working. But now we are in 2024, and in person is an option again. I don't know if we ever got to normality. I think the pendulum is swinging still a lot. Many organizations actually turn to remote as a default way of working, and some headquarters are kind of empty. But I think the pendulum is still swinging a lot, and what is the resulting shape of a company, of an organization, is still yet to be assessed correctly. I was actually talking about it in the last XP conference in Bolzano just 3 weeks ago. And if you're interested in this one, I have a very kind of sad and pessimistic perspective over the consequences of remote working. Like, I think organizations didn't fully understand the consequences, and if we connect all the dots, it's not exactly an exciting picture. But I'm not gonna be talking about this. Just if you're curious, or maybe space in the Q&A, that's a talk that I wrote for this specific thing. End of the intro, I would like to get into big picture EventStorming. Well, The big picture workshop is probably the most interesting because it's defying some of the rules of traditional workshop. It just start with the idea of inviting all the right people. Part of the recipe is providing an unlimited modeling space. This is vital because so many problems we are dealing with just get discussed or artificially chopped, divide and conquer, this type of thinking, many times because, one, we don't have enough space to model this. We are constrained by the size of a whiteboard, for example. And we think that we have to focus. We are missing the tools for dealing with complexity in the large, which is a very dumb starting point if we think about it. If you're dealing with mid-sized problem, let's leverage our ability to visualize, sketch a diagram, visualize the problem in a few things, discuss, pointing finger to things. But if we're dealing with large problem, let's get back to the less efficient. Let's talk about it around the table, which is not going to help. So we are having advanced strategies for mid-sized problem and dumb strategies for large problem. So it doesn't take a genius to think, what if we have more space? Maybe we could deal with a larger problem. But the idea of unlimited modeling space is actually larger. It's not only the paper roll, giving the illusion of a giant-sized whiteboard, but also the abundance of markers, stickies, whatever is going to make you feel that there is no scarcity. Don't think about the markers. Don't think about, we won't have time to discuss this. Just write it down. No problem. We're going to find a space for this. And then the most natural shape for a big picture workshop is to model an entire business line. Every single department involved, every single step, all the story from the beginning to the end, left to right. So the question about, shouldn't we focus? The answer is no, most of the time. Because there is so much advantage in seeing the whole at least once in your career inside an organization. Then, of course, this is not a dogma. You can run an EventStorming instead of a big picture, a mid-sized picture, but you will miss a lot of the potential. Like there's something special that happens when you're looking at the board, you're exhausted, and you feel like that is actually everything. I cannot think of anything more that should fit into this picture. There's a bonus that gets unlocked at that time. So, so how do you run a workshop like this? Because it looks like a big mess. Well, let's start with a mess. Actually, making a mess and sorting it out is exactly a key mechanic for a big picture EventStorming. We provide some foundation, just a paper roll and a timeline left to right. I don't make long introduction. I really would like to give the message of we can start very, very quickly. And so my introduction is 2 or 3 minutes, or maybe even less. There's a little bit of extra facilitation tricks, like making sure everybody has a marker, being intentionally rude, so maybe not giving markers to everybody, but and markers and stickies, but making sure they are accessible, but they have to stand up. So the moment you are already standing, now it doesn't make sense to get back at the table and write. I will go straight to the surface. The other main trick is I'm leveraging the power of imitation. Like I'm asking people to do something for the first time, and of course they don't know how to do it perfectly. What do human beings do in this scenario? They look around. They look to other people that seems to have a little bit more comfort in this scenario, and they imitate. They repeat what others are doing. They mimic. They don't know exactly what you're doing, but the moment somebody starts putting orange sticky notes to the wall, and the facilitator doesn't correct them, like your event is wrong or anything like this, please don't do this. If one is doing it and it gets approved, that's easy, I can do it too. So you get to 0, 1, 2, everybody really, really quickly. The grammar we're using for the exploration is very simple. It's intentionally simple. We have domain events. For historical reason, we started using them in Orange. At the beginning, I thought the core was going to be the aggregate, so I kept a common yellow for the aggregate. Then I needed colors for readability. An event turned out to be orange. Then I kept it because, I had already pictures in this way. And the grammar is simple. This is orange. This should be in the past tense. Put it on the timeline. And even kids can do this. It's not entirely true. Somebody will make it wrong, but just let it go for the initial stages. The reason why this becomes interesting is because inside the organization, nobody knows the entire story. You will have different sources of truth, areas where the truth is lacking. You only have second-hand information, but everybody, especially in very siloed organization, will have only a partial representation of the story. And you don't want to run separate interviews, especially when kicking off a project. You want to see, and you want also to show that individual stories do not make a coherent whole. Then, of course, if you force people to work on a single surface, while you're constraining the discussion to lean towards a coherent whole, because this area should fit with this other one. This event should happen right after this, except an exception that I should be documenting on the board as well. A little warning. Nouns in every exploration will fool you. And if you're trying to skip the learning part using LLMs or any other new fancy tool, they will be fooled as well. But let's move on. Second step is enforcing the timeline. So the first moment was called chaotic exploration. Basically, everybody was free to do whatever they wanted. Okay, now I see clusters which are locally organized, but the whole is not consistent. Let's try to make the whole consistent. At this moment, people start to talk. There is no way you can sort 200 sticky notes without having a conversation with your neighbors. And the neighbors are exactly the people you should talk to. So one of the brilliant things of EventStorming, you have localized the parallel conversation happening exactly between the people that should talk to each other. That's pretty cool. When you see it happening, you realize, I'm saving a couple of weeks for the entire project lifespan. This conversation is so precious. Of course, not every conversation is peaceful, or you will have sarcasm. You will have friction and contradiction. This is where a new color starts to help you. Magenta, probably, but this color is named differently according to nations and culture, and also to availability of 3M stickies supply. But I call it a hotspot. Like whenever there's something relevant popping up in the conversation, I capture this. So the model is not only for the beautiful part, actually is a model of all the possible contradictions in the system. And this is more or less the result. This is a result for a conference organization scenario, and it starts with event, building blocks of our storytelling, the hotspots then pop up. Then we start adding the people, little yellow, doing things, and the systems where the things can happen. It might be technological, like I see at AWS, well, there was also printers, but it might be external organization like tax agencies, governments, and so on. An interesting definition for systems is also whatever we can blame that opens the gates of possible negative thinking. Initially, the workshop starts with very optimistic thinking. The first thing you get described is the rosy scenario, for example. But then we keep on the conversation. And during the conversation, some boundaries are starting to emerge, the little vertical yellow line. So whatever is the color of the paper tape you can find. And then in this scenario, we also went adding some extra toppings like ideas or opportunities to improve the systems in green in this scenario, and also voted for the areas that could be changed first, or the problems that needed an improvement more massively. In general, a big picture format has something like a standard recipe. These are the key steps, like chaotic exploration, enforcing the timeline, kick off the conversation, and a little bit of sorting plus hotspots, but not good enough because it's localized, distributed, and so on. Then we add more ingredients with people and systems. People and system also forces us to add more events, because I might have an event which is specific to an external system, or the potential failure of an external system opens a side story. Okay, now we have enough information for what usually happens in the afternoon, which is called the explicit walkthrough, where a narrator will try to tell the story in front of the audience with the support of a scribe. Narrator will tell the story. The audience will say like, oh, wait a minute, Alberto, it doesn't happen this way. We have also this and this scenario, or sometimes we do this and this. And the poor scribe is writing all the possible notes in form of events so that we can adjust the model to make sure that what we see has a one-on-one relationship with what we just said. It should follow the grammar, but also should reflect the conversation that just happened. So progressively, the board starts getting tidier and reflecting all the key conversation of the people. You can see people starting to nod in approval, like, okay, yes, now I see that my objection is visualized and the model is getting better. What we get at the end, this is usually the moment where we are 1 hour before closing the day. But this is the moment of, okay, we see the whole thing. We have the clarity of, okay, we sorted out this mess. And this is also a very powerful way to learn in the physical world. But also one of the little bonuses that I was mentioning before is just, especially in large organization, one of the blockers for change is that people are afraid of breaking invisible things. Think about being in a bank. You're always going to find the departments that you were not aware of, and you're not going to change anything of the default behavior because if you break something that you're not aware of, you're making the bank lose money, poor bankers. And but this attitude is absolutely there. The solution of EventStorming is just let's just make everything visible so that this can eventually enable the confidence of what if we skip this step, nobody's actually interested, or what if we replace this sub-process with this other alternative. We have to manage this and this consequence, and we see all of them. There is a backup plan for each one of these scenarios. Confidence is actually very, very interesting as an outcome of this workshop. Other bonus outcomes, like once we complete the walkthrough and the validated narrative, we are in a great place, and we could decide what to do at this level. Let me be more explicit about the outcome of the exploration. We are not solving the issues during the workshop. There is no time for this. We are trying to time box it in one day, but we are trying to visualize everything. This format is also really scalable, just because we try not to solve stuff, and there's a lot of parallel activity going on. We can make it scale. The problem is, on one side, the facilitation, but mostly is lack of oxygen, meaning like the room size. If we have a very large room, we can make it work, 35 and even 50 or more people. We might have a map of the current situation or a plausible map of future state. It works in terms of notation exactly in the same way. In terms of dynamics is a completely different beast, but that's about, in the future, you don't have skeleton in the closet. And in terms of outcomes, I like to separate official and unofficial outcomes. There's massive learning. We can extract bounded context. We can have corporate alignment. But in terms of unofficial outcomes, the business side might be learning the business in a way that would never admit. And also for me as a potential person involved in a software project, spotting the enemy, meaning that enterprise projects do not fail because of technology, they fail because of politics. And in this workshop, we see politics in a very clear way. Once we get to the validated narrative, every other layer becomes cheap. So basically, in the last hour, we ran downhill. And so the approach that I like most is looking for a blocker highlighted by blue arrows. This is telling me, oh, we gather all the key people in the same room. We discuss about everything for the whole day, providing data clarification and all the possible stuff. Everybody decided, voted, stated that this is the most important problem. Why not solving it? So the actual outcome for me is having the analysis and political momentum in the same workshop. That is massive. Like, there is no way to stop a train like this. This might not always be achieved. Sometimes you have political reasons not to go in this direction, but that's a perfect cherry on the pie for a good workshop. Other possible toppings on the standard recipe might be to explore the value. We will see something more about it in the next step, highlighting the steps that where we are creating or destroying value. Problems and opportunities plus arrow voting is more or less what I just described. Emergent boundaries, looking for bounded context in a separate tail. Not everybody cares about your bounded context, but also a kind of like team topology style, looking for the team boundaries and or matching the team boundaries with the bounded context. Let me be more explicit here. During the workshop, you might, we are not circling the area, but we might see this, like there are blockers between phases, which are giving us a lot of information. There are also horizontal swim lanes and other indicators. I can give you something very specific for this pattern in the human behavior. One first ingredient is you might have a sticky note that has been reported by many people, and so kind of like duplicates, and it's also a key event in multiple stories. But the interesting pattern is the expert on the left and the ignorant on the right. So the person on the left might say something like, an item needs to have an approved description of a high quality image before being added to the catalog, while the ignorant to the right say like, just give me a valid URL and I'll start tweaking about it. Do these people need exactly the same model? Clearly not. They are talking about the same product or item on sale, but they don't need to have the same level of sophistication in the model dealing with this. And of course, the ignorant on the right will be the expert for somebody else downstream. So it's not about judging the personalities. But what I wanted to say is the moment you add individuals to the picture, you get a lot of information because people are taking place on the board around the areas that matters. And you will learn that these people are in a given shape. You will remember it even if you don't consciously know. And this is one of the greatest massive stuff. You also will remember the shape of the model. We had a workshop where we were forced to remove everything from the wall after the second day, but we had a third day in the room. And on the third day, everybody was pointing to an empty wall, remembered that problem over there. And everybody understood it, even if the problem was not there, because they unconsciously remembered that this corner was exactly the place where the intricate problem was. So the level of learning was a lot deeper than we actually imagined. Now the tough question, can we do it remotely for a big picture? let me show you why this is not exactly the best solution. In an in-person experience, we have some good consequences. Like, we are in person, there's a stronger peer pressure. I'm not taking out my phone because there are other people in the room looking at me and they don't have phones, laptop up. And also the fact that we are in a lo-fi environment means well, the laptop and the phone are not necessary. This is giving us a full focus. The people in the room might get tired together or hungry together, but we are completely focused on one single task. This is giving us the possibility of delivering a lot of stuff in one day. Not to mention the fact that it's the feeling of it's only 2 days, there are people flying back home, is giving an extra pressure for a commitment to finish. Plus, the parallel conversation throughput, not a single microphone, is giving more bandwidth for conversation, and so we're going faster. If we go remotely, a few things start to fall apart. So there's very limited peer pressure. Nobody knows if I'm playing Candy Crush on my phone while somebody else is exploring a boring area. There's only one conversation possible at the same time, and this will slow things down. The fact that everybody's doing it remotely, and we have one more chance next week or next day, so the commitment to finish goes away. And we also have to do shorter batches, so it's not one single day. I granted my presence for 1 day. Now I can think about granting my presence for the next session, but I'm deciding after what I saw in the first 2.5 hours. And yeah, I saw something, but not groundbreaking. While in picture, we were seeing big things before people had the chance to opt out. So let's say I know how a good workshop should taste like. We managed to make it work remotely during the pandemic, where there were no alternatives possible. The moment we could reopen the door for a big picture, okay, well, let's get back to in person. It goes a lot better. Some people were happy. I mean, the workshop can still deliver, and the alternative is not understanding your business if you have a remote organization. But still, I felt like, no, that's not the way to, you could do this a lot better. So can I make carbonara with cream? How many ingredients can I replace and still call it a carbonara? Well, in carbonara, the answer is known, but yeah, that's more or less what happened. In general, the summary is we learned new facilitation techniques, and we improved a lot from the very beginning. If somebody is asking us, can we facilitate the session distributed? Yes, but it's gonna take a few days and not only one. And we need patience, and we also need a lot more commitment from the people involved. So yeah, still the recommendation is run it in person. And yes, I would stop for a second and get back to short Q&A. Maybe if any question on this part.
Alberto, I've got a question for you. It's CP, by the way. So when you say big picture, how big a picture do you kind of go? Like, I've had situations prior where it was, you know, like it's a really big organization. So how much of our business process do you kind of capture? You know, like, do you draw boundaries around? Because the more you can get the whole company in the room and put everything in there, right? That's massive, right?
Yeah.
Like, where do you draw the boundaries? And also, second part question is like, do you draw timeline boundaries? Right? Hey, this is what typically happens for doing a job to be done, kind of thing, or is it like multiple quarters because you need to do like your taxes and things like that? That could also be part of your business process. Like, where do you kind of draw the boundaries around this big picture concept?
I draw the boundaries later. after, so there is one natural dimension, which is an entire business line, because the important area for me and for this format is to see where departments are not collaborating well. So I'm a trouble seeker. I want to see friction, and I don't want to cut the scope upfront. In this way, we might get in a place where we get the illusion of consensus inside the room. Okay, this is everything that happens, except it doesn't work, because in another department there is another person setting constraint of what the flow is supposed to be. So the premise of big picture is let's try to see everything around a single business line, and let's try to see the areas where this illusion of flow is vanishing, where sales is selling more projects than the development team can actually deliver. What are you looking at? Do you see the team capacity, or what is the strategy for sales versus the strategy for delivery? I'm looking for massive inconsistencies between departments, and to do so, I need to look at the whole. And so that is the main idea. Variation have been like we've been working with product over platform. So maybe having one or two products that were supposed to work on a shared platform, and the timeline were kind of different. It's a little bit bumpier. It needs actually more space and maybe a more sophisticated organization. But the whole idea is I want to see the places where the story of Department A and the story of Department B are colliding. And that's why I don't want to cut it. Of course, I can still do the cut and run smaller workshop, but then there's a political consequence, which is if you talk with one group and you get a consistent story, and then if you talk with another group and you get another consistent story, but then you realize that two stories don't hold on together, well, then you are the bearer of an inconvenient truth. You might get shot as a messenger in the process. By putting everybody in the same room, you're basically forcing them to give you a story, and you're forcing coherence on that story. They might not admit, oh, we never realized that our requirements have been conflicting in the past 3 years, but now it's there. And even more, it's not your problem anymore. Now it's an organization problem. So I'm saying this because many times, especially if you collect information in 5, 6 separate interviews, you will have the smell of something is wrong, but then you're going to be the politically weak person to bear the bad news. In this way, they will own the inconsistency. Or, yeah, the business side. I'm using they probably in a wrong way. I'm the business side in many situations. But we need to. There is no way. That's one thing to remember. There is no way to align IT to business if the business side is not aligned with the business. And that's the most important thing. We are forcing the narrative to be coherent, then turning it into actionable requirements becomes a lot easier. That is the main reason. Of course, you can make trade-offs. You can take a leader scope, but you're giving up something. One thing is this feeling of, okay, I can see the whole thing. One thing that happened in my organization was the moment we explored the whole thing with new hires, they were, the moment I also was giving the feedback, like, there's nothing more than this. This is all we do. And then the new hires were, oh, why don't you change that? Why don't you do that instead? And we could start changing and improving in less than 1 month from people being hired. I mean, you don't have this confidence in many organizations, and they were not proposing stupid things. They were proposing sensible improvement with the confidence of we are not breaking stuff because you told me there's nothing connected to this, so this change is safe. And if you have a young company and they want to grow, this is actually a very good enabler. tech.
Thank you.
Okay, I will take Sebastian question and then move on to the next format.
Thank you, Alberto. It's rare that we have the opportunity to talk directly to someone that come up with an idea that's so practical to our day-to-day work, and this is a great opportunity. I have been able to experience a few sessions of EventStorming, either myself leading it or being part of the sessions, and I also take the point of a very large space can be a fantastic space to explore. I remember one session with 3 walls were full of ideas, and it was a fantastic discovery. So many people were able to learn. The question I have for you is, I think that this is a fantastic tool to explore existing processes, existing business. Where I have personally found difficult is when I try to use this tool as an exploration space, when we have already a working system and we are ideating to bring something new to the platform. That becomes quite an ambiguous tool. Will you agree, or do you have any advice on how can we adapt this when the space of exploration is still quite open?
Well, it depends. It depends on the existing system. So I have 2 directions. One, if you use it to explore an existing legacy application, you just said system, but that's one scenario. Well, then it depends on the application. Like some software is workflow based, and in this case, I really like the contrast of somebody telling a business story from the point of view of the user. I need to do this. I need to open a booking. I need to add some information. Then I need to finalize it, and seeing the contrast with the narrative of the person which is entrapped in the operation provided by the legacy. I mean, this can be painful for the brain, and I like it. Because I'm a bastard, probably, but also because this pain for the brain is telling that the design of the legacy is not meeting the expectation of the user. And I would like to identify the moments where the user is asking a very simple thing, and to perform this, so you need to do 3-4 operation, which means like you're not capturing the business intent on this side. So when it comes to, I know a few people have been using EventStorming also to explore the behavior of legacy systems for refactoring. I would say it depends on the system. If the system is workflow based, then it works really well, even if it feels painful. If the system is just like a risk engine calculator, maybe you end up finding a lot of vertical events happening in no particular order, then it won't exactly work. On the other end of this possible answer to your question, I've been using similar techniques, not exactly EventStorming, also to model in the large scale stuff which is just a gigantic mess. In this case, I don't even call it EventStorming anymore. I call it model storming. The principles are the same. We start with something. We ask to the audience, what is the next thing that you would like to see? What is the most important detail which is not yet represented? And then we pick a color or a annotation trick that has not been used. We repeat, we go in a given direction, and then we improve the model layer after layer. I've been doing experiments like this in the last Como camp in Austria, and the goal in this space was let's try to model something like global warming. So very intricate, very large scale, but still we could start it was an open space session, so we clearly could not finish that. But there were emerging patterns that we could leverage for a deeper discussion. I mean, the whole idea of there's not enough space to discuss this. No, we just need a large space, and then there are ways and patterns to represent it, and it takes time, but there is a great advantage in having a physical, visible, tangible model to discuss. And just a set of slightly different patterns in this case. And I will take Chris, I'm sorry, I have a few more on the presentation, and then I will go to the more practical formats.
I don't have a question, Alberto, thank you, but I just wanted to throw to the room and see if anyone in Melbourne had a question, if they wanted to come up to the mic and ask it, because we had a couple from the people on the remote call. But if everyone in the room is good, then happy for you to move on.
So I'll move on to the other part. Maybe we have a little bit more extra to see. Now, can you see my screen? Yes, again?
Yes.
Okay. So all of these tricks were about modeling without deciding. Like the key idea was we have one day, we need to visualize all the different point of view, restructure them. If we have low-hanging fruit, let's solve them. But that is not design. I mean, I can make it work with so many people because we're not deciding stuff. Deciding is the hard part. Even more as a facilitation tool, when I see that people are trying to decide something, especially before we visualizing, then I jump in and say, like, no, write it down. We'll decide if it's a good idea or not later on. So that's a pretty good enabler. When we go to process modeling, well, that's a different thing. It's a little bit more like a collaborative design of solution. We can still use the process modeling as a precise investigation tool, but we will start using it also as a way to discover and design things together. A few assumptions. We are working on an important problem. Maybe the one has been voted on the workshop in the previous day. The problem has a solution in terms of a process that might be supported by software, but also not necessarily. I mean, it's very hard to have a process which is not supported by software nowadays, but still, I know that some people have been using EventStorming, just modeling processes. I know one country in Europe modeled the process of registering immigrants using EventStorming, and they were happy. So, yeah. The other assumption was the key experts are available. Business people from the departments involved, technical expert, and but also service designer, UX designer. We would like to see different perspective. And more or less, we have a scope a little bit better defined. So there might be probably more way to start the process, but we normally start from one way. And the process will end in a stable state, represented by one or more domain event, like the payment has been completed, the item has been delivered or home, and the payment is also visible in some account in some way. Just, I mean, a stable state, nothing more needs to happen. That's more or less the shape that we are looking at. And the dynamics of facilitation are actually really, really different because consensus is very, very expensive to reach, especially if the personalities in the team are very different. So the trick for me was like, how can I make specialists with different backgrounds cooperate towards a common goal without a danger? I mean, there was a story behind it from a TED video from Amy Edmondson about having leaders collaborate together. I don't want to have an emergency. I'm happy if there is a sense of corporate urgency about we need to solve this problem, but I don't want to risk anybody's life in the process. So the idea was to, well, use cooperative games. And that's not an original idea. Alistair Coburn was putting this idea in this old but very, very influential book, Agile Software Development, the Cooperative Game. And I realized this is just not only the way I facilitate the educational workshop, this is also the way I work. I mean, I'm joining people in an organization. We explore the problem together, and then, well, it's a puzzle. I want to crack it. I want to win it. It's something like an escape room that I play with people that I, many times just met. And which are the rules of this game? Very simple. One, every path should be completed. The color grammar should be respected. every stakeholder should be reasonably happy, and every hotspot that emerged during the discussion should be addressed. Let me be more explicit. When we say every path should be completed, we would like to end customer satisfied, happy customer, coupon sent, and in a stable state that is. Please don't look at the colors here. This team was doing a very good job in the modeling the flow, but the colors might not be the best indication for the grammar, but the grammar will be represented here. Anyway, we have many different paths, like ending with no further action is necessary. And yes, that's more or less where we would like to be. Second thing, color grammar is respected. The original grammar for the format is actually coming from this picture, which is a very old one. I call it the picture that explains everything, and it just says like there is a cycle, and that is repeated in every workshop, more or less. And human beings, the little yellow one, are making decisions based by real world experience, maybe like I'm hungry, and information they could see in a read model, which might be, well, the flavors of ice cream available, their price, and so on. And this way I decide to issue a command on a system. This command produces an event. This event might be associated with value generated or destroyed, but this event will also can also be translated in another read model, like maybe reducing the availability of something, or increasing the balance if I paid something. But also an event can activate a policy, triggering another command. So this is more or less the grammar in action. Still, events, hotspot are still there. Policies with reactive logic. Policies are the special guest in this grammar. Systems are very similar to what we just done in the big picture format, same for people. Now the green part is the read models, the data needed to take a given decision. What are you looking at when deciding this? And command is the result in action. Put in another way, that's more or less the summary for this information. So I'm forcing people to stick to the grammar, because that's one of the rules of the game. And this is forcing people to think in a given way. And the most annoying, most common question is, do we always need the policies? Something that people would like to skip. And I would say, yes, my game, my rules. Why are policies important? It's basically because it's a glue between something that happens and the consequence. It might be automation. It might be a habit in the head of a person. But yeah, it's just something like between the orange and the blue. But it's also the piece of your business process that has the highest probability of being controversial. Put in another way, this is where everybody lies. You might get into workshops where one business expert is telling you one story, then you capture this inside the policy, and you talk with another expert telling you a slightly different story. And the reason is, policies are the things that evolves when an organization grows. The steps are the same. The policies will change because of the change of size, change of experience, new regulation, and so on. But this is great. We know that the area where we should focus on as detectives is exactly the policy. The other reason is ambiguity does not compile. We are technical people. We need the binary, precise information to write code. And policies might be ambiguous and controversial. So let's make our experts be binary when they are telling us story. The other part that I really like about the policies is it captures a spectrum of evolution. So you might have habits, policies without an agreement, explicit team agreement, or implicit. You might have rules, regulations. You might have regulations which are violated in practice. And at a given level, you will have automation, and that might be implemented with listener, sagas, process manager, or whatever can fulfill the job. There is a drift in moving from manual operation towards automation, but there is also an opposite drift, moving from automated to human decision, which was actually a very great card to play in some modeling session. Not to mention that the policies are all over the place where now AI is playing a role. So you might want to pair the human decision maker with an AI and see the way it's working. What I wanted to highlight is just I'm not designing a tool which is given a one-to-one relationship between the sticky notes and the code. I'm trying to shape the conversation, leading us to an artifact which is robust and coherent and unambiguous, and then you have a little bit more freedom for the implementation. It's not about the code, it's about the conversation mostly. A few extra information about the rules, like stakeholders should be happy, and I mean it. I mean, we use this little notation in the online version. We go emojis, and these are part of the official notation for the EventStorming on Miro type of format. But the thing that I like is just like looking and discussing with the people in the team. Well, every step can actually create or destroy value. But when I say value, most of the people think money. And money is actually kind of boring. There are so many other values involved in a business process. It might be time, it might be safety, it might be reputation, happiness, engagement, and a few other things. Like this question is about the value that we create is very open, and might actually lead to very interesting discoveries. Like for my company, it was interesting one day to discover that our partners were not doing it for the money, they were doing it for the engagement. So we started optimizing for the engagement instead of money. Then, well, actually money improved as a side effect, but we were doing the right thing. Also, reading suggestion, there's a fantastic book from Niklas Modig. The book is called This is Lean. And he said something simple and powerful at the same time, like an organization can only optimize for one thing. And it might be revenues, it might be happiness, it might be safety, it might be effectiveness or whatever. But mathematically, you can only optimize for one coordinate. So pick yours carefully and don't be ambiguous in the process. Other thing about dealing with value, like money is the obvious one, but it's a zero-sum currency, meaning like I'm giving you money, I'm losing, and you're getting. Of course, I will be getting something like good. Other currencies which are more interesting, joy, reputation, satisfaction, engagement. The other thing that I like, these are not zero-sum game anymore. Like if I am happier, maybe I'm making you happier. So we are both happier. I'm not giving and taking, we are sharing. Same dynamics with ideas, engagement, and creativity. So why not? Why is this working well? I mean, this is a place that was not a blue ocean. UML, activity diagrams, BPMN were already existing notation in this area. But to be honest, they were not designed to support the conversation. They were designed to be good, precise documentation. There was the lightweight version of let's go to a whiteboard, but in a whiteboard, you can only draw many rectangles for a complex process. But actually, I never saw so many conversations happening on and in UML. Even more, UML was not designed to be interdisciplinary. It was the moment you went UML or BPMN, well, engineering is taking the lead. Not so interesting. One thing that we discovered quite recently, we've been working a little bit more in the product exploration state. There's a very interesting area, and called continuous discovery. And this is a place where process modeling, EventStorming, when modeling, discussing, simulating behavior of the user in a specific area, works very, very well. Pretty good cocktail. Another thing that we can do with this format is extracting user stories. And the moment we model the whole flow and we highlight the places where we are generating value, well, it sometimes extracting user stories, because 90% of the conversation already happened, is just rewriting a sequence of sticky notes from a command or a triggering event to a stable state with somebody happy. Okay, well, that's a user story. I just need a label for that. The other thing that we do a lot is extracting acceptance test. While we have a good flow, it's making, yeah, looks like we covered all the situation. Not enough. Let's put names. Let's put numbers. Let's turn that into, well, the good old BDD format, given the past event or the information we can see in the read models when we are activating this command, then we are expecting these events to happen and this data to be observable in this read model. It's not about the test automation. It's about challenging your expert with numbers, names, and corner cases. Absolutely powerful. Now you can see exactly where this is going to fit on a visible model. The final thing is we're using a lot this process modeling format by taking ideas from this book from Jim Benson, The Collaboration Equation. He's actually talking a lot about the Obeya concept, which is the decision room in Lean, or a large space where we can model everything. The way we do this, and for this scenario we move to the digital format, is by hybridating. There's something like little processes. This is something is not visible enough intentionally, because that's so that you might not get what this is about. But there's something which is a navigation funnel with screenshot on the company website. There are processes upfront, like media and marketing, deciding, for example, which pages to be boosted by advertising campaign. There's a complex funnel for purchase, and then there is the people manage the area of direct sale, post sales, and so on. But that's a place where we could have a more sophisticated conversation and decision making, looking at data, looking at the actual step, and building a contradiction, not a contradiction, a collaboration between different departments. Now, can we do it remotely? Well, the answer is clearly yes, because this was happening on Miro. But in general, the scenario is we have reduced loss compared to the big picture. It's something that happens in a different format. It's still slower. It's just like we're never going to get to the same speed of modeling it together. It has a heavier duty on the facilitator. You need somebody who is good as a facilitator and also good with Miro, and also quick in doing this. So maybe we'll need 2 facilitators splitting the job. The obvious advantage is the artifact could be made available to a large audience, so you can also play. We are running this workshop. Maybe not everybody could join, but the results are there, so a synchronous contribution. Theoretically possible, in practice not always perfect, but yeah, human touch is kind of still missing. And I would like to get quickly on the software part to get to a little more of Q&A. This is going to be a little bit faster. So when talking about the software side, now we are looking for information about how to design our system, and with DDD in mind. How can we make it work? We never mentioned the aggregate. They were part of the original blog post. The solution for me, if we stick to the collaborative games approach, well, it's just an expansion set. We add stuff to the original game, and what we add is not so much. I mean, but many expansions are really a way to get more money from the gamers. But we add one more extra rule, like aggregates should be coherent, whatever that means. We add the new color, the aggregate is yellow, and the detailed grammar now looks something like this. So the system that we're talking about now is explicitly external. That's something that we might also call black box. We are not changing it, while the yellow one, our component, is something that we can change. They are both taking commands and meeting events. Sometimes also the policies are something that we might be designing, but we still keep the same color. Also, we start visualizing the boundaries between the different areas of the software, because they might get relevant. And this is one picture from an in-person workshop. And yes, this more or less same grammar: events, hotspot, policies, external system, people, read models, command direction, then the aggregates, which are, well, we might see them as state machine or independent components. And so the problem with modeling aggregates is they are still a tricky beast. Like most of the people, they start by naming this, like, well, we are selling a ticket, or we are selling, and so this is a ticket. And maybe the first thing that you're dealing with is not yet a ticket. I'm actually looking a lot for state machine logic, so something that is pending and then suspended or conferred or cancelled. The focus in an EventStorming session is most on behavior, not data. Data will fool you in so many ways. And one of the trick is do not fall in love with the name. So you can play maybe with nameless aggregates for a while, or I put a lot of hyphen, like this is the first name that popped in my mind, but I'm not loving it. So I might feel free to rework on the name. Please, strong recommendation, don't fall in love with your intuition. The other thing which is interesting in terms of modeling is if we stick to the timeline, which is helping the business participants of this workshop, we are missing something in terms of role and responsibility type of design. So we might look at signals which are more like parentheses, like there's an opening and closing symmetry, many flows. So this big little yellow at the beginning and at the end probably is the same thing, or needs to be the same thing, because maybe here we are starting an enrollment transaction which is pending for the whole flow, and that needs to be marked as completed when we are done. Same can go for maybe for this policy. This external system can be maybe an external payment system, and we might need the payment coordinator for the actual activity. So that's we are giving up something to make the model more readable for non-business, for non-technical person, but we need to discover new patterns in the way. The other thing is people is talking about stuff, but people can only see so much stuff. So the business can tell us something very important in terms of the actions they want to perform on a system, in terms of the data they need to see on screen, and also in terms of user needs and so on. But our territory is different, like how to name the aggregate. That's my problem, not yours. And so I'm taking the business information with, selecting, this is a great idea. No, this is my territory. Great idea, yeah, still, but I will be the one deciding. I'm not letting the business naming my aggregate. But I think that is the most important summary. Like, if we want to have a format which is interdisciplinary, if you want to talk with business, UX, service design, and technology, every notation needs to drop down something. We are giving up a little bit as individuals in order to succeed as a team. Also, a single tool won't be enough to solve everything, including EventStorming. If you feel like, okay, I'm seeing something, but I need another representation, well, make sure you have a flip chart available nearby. Make sure you can go to UML. Make sure you can also attach graph and data if what you're missing is business data or a conversion tool for a sales funnel. Whatever is can be added to the learning is great. And final recommendation for modeling is this hotspot. Like people are doing a couple of recurring mistakes. One, they are trying to go for a good solution too early, and it's not going to happen. And then they will be opening many branches. This hotspot is going to be your friend, meaning that when you're trying to model a system and somebody's telling you, oh, wait a minute, you also have the returning customer, you also have to handle cancellation. Yes, great. Not now. Let me finish the baseline. We'll get back at it later. This is necessary, just like oxygen. I mentioned the fact that modeling, both in process modeling and in software design, requires an interdisciplinary team, but it also requires a complementary attitude. And so I would like to have people from the business, from software design, user experience, and design. But in terms of attitude, I would like to have exactly this type of behavior. So I have these 3 behavioral archetypes that I can describe, and I guess you have them too. Archetype 1 is the driller. That's a person usually coming up with alternatives, what if scenario, corner cases, what if the person buys 2 tickets and forgets he already bought one? What if there's a currency fluctuation just during the purchase transaction? Yeah, all of the possible things. Like, it's great to have one person in the team like that. It's very dangerous to have everybody in the team like that without being balanced by other personalities. I know many of you are going to be drillers. I'm one of them as well. But we need to be balanced. We need to have a pragmatic, maybe somebody coming from the business, maybe even better, somebody with data, somebody telling that's why the numbers, the percentages, while all of these corner cases are great, but 80% of the customers are single customer buying one, they're doing one single purchase. So if we can go live with this simple scenario, we are already covering 80% of the market. Then next week, we go for the other alternatives. That's fantastic. We need to balance these 2 roles. I have no idea which one is right. I would like to just the discussion to happen. The 3rd role to balance is the empathic. The person caring about emotions and feeling, the person saying like, oh yes, but if you give them just a bad exception in the face, that's not a good experience. We probably need to tell stories in a slightly different way, provide a better message, make sure that even a rejection is not going to turn into losing a customer, and so on. So one of the little thing is just big picture needs an explicit facilitation, because 30 people needs to be managed, while process modeling and software design, they are usually happening in smaller groups. We can also make them happen in larger groups if needed. In this case, facilitation is probably needed. But if they are happening in smaller groups, you just need fluency, not facilitation. And the only thing that I do as a facilitator, except the obvious controlling the grammar, I'm just balancing the dominating attitude. If everybody's a driller, then I try to be the pragmatic or the empathic. I'm reading the room and playing the counterbalancing role. I'm actually going to go quick on this. Strategies and complex moves, 3 possible openings. You can start from the beginning. you can start from the end and go back, or you can make a little exploration mess with the event, but that will need strict time boxing. Every strategy has advantages and disadvantages, the weird story is I use all of them, and I use all of them in the same workshop. So you start in one way, and then probably we need to see it from the end. We need to find to use different styles for modeling inside the same flow. So it's not going to be a prescription. Collaborative games, their essence is the rules are clear, but then finding the best strategy is up to the team. Let's put this to a different stage. Team agreements. We are not really good in modeling together. Maybe we are not even really good in modeling alone, but modeling together makes things really, really hard. That's a picture from an architectural discussion in the company I used to work in the past. An architectural discussion could be a really, really cruel game. You need to destroy your opponent, making them look stupid so that your ideas is better. That's not the way we want to run in with EventStorming. And one of the most interesting tool we discovered was playing with temporary leadership. When I say temporary, I basically set a timer, maybe 4 minutes, more or less. Sometimes we get down to 3, but for the next 4 minutes, one person is in charge, and they can define what is the working agreement for this short time slot. So something like, can you please be quiet? I have an idea, but I don't want to be interrupted. Or I have an idea, I don't know how to flesh it out. Can somebody join me as a scribe? And we might all try to go and try to solve it, or take some ideas from mob programming or ensemble programming. Can you please tell me what to do? Or can you please stop telling me? You just give me only silent feedback with hotspot and so on. Or sometimes, if finding an agreement is really hard, we can go to split and merge and having more teams coming back with the solution, because agreeing in 10 might be harder than agreeing in 5 and then merging into 2. The thing is, I don't know what is the best one, but this time box idea works very, very well. Can you do it remotely? Yes. We are losing something compared to the big picture. You can play poker at the table, and you can play poker online. It's not exactly collaborative game, so bad example, but it's different if you play it at the table. There's a lot of extra nuances which are making the game more interesting. I would say it's risky on the human side here, because you might be losing so many nuances, and I know many thinkers which are focusing on the solution and completely missing the emotional feedback from the room. And if you do it in person, there's a joyful side that could be used to recover situation, while it might be missing if you do it online. But the common trade-off is that we're running many small sessions, maybe improving the original artifact. So wrapping it up, I'm using a lot of pizza metaphor, because the standard recipe, especially for the big picture, is more or less the same. Tomato, mozzarella, okay, that's the basic. Then you can add topics. No database tables, no pineapple, debatable. But the thing which is interesting is these 3 formats are very compatible. They used to be one thing, so we could have a very business-oriented discussion and talking about the big picture, then zooming in with process modeling, and zoom even more in, getting into aggregates, and even zoom out. The conversation is coherent. Consider that we can also provide coherence in terms of team organization, value generation, and so on. So having 3 artifacts providing a coherent view and a coherent discussion, not bad. I mean, I like it. Second thing with this 3 format is about the choice between in-person or remote. This depends on your organization. If your organization is co-located, I would go in person for big picture and process modeling. For software design, I will start in person. Usually it works pretty well if you are focusing on a set of features, modeling based on paper. And then when you move it to the other stuff, well, turn it digital and for further references. If your organization is natively remote, okay, catering for big pictures, and then, well, the other session will be remote, and your people would be used to do a remote session. And yeah, and I would say this is the final thing that I wanted to highlight. This is a trade-off thing. It's not as precise as BPMN or UML, but it's meant to be engaging and to establish a crossover collaboration. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. Plus references. And now I can get back and see you if you're still there. Now I will pass the ball to Chris in terms of timing. And
yeah, thanks, Alberto. That's been fantastic. I thought we might start by asking the room in Melbourne if they have any questions first, to give them a chance to go first, and then see if anyone on the call has some questions. I'm happy to take spend a bit more time on questions. I think that'd be really valuable for people. So what do you think? I don't know, Sonal, is there anyone in Melbourne that wants to get up and ask a question? I think we have a couple on the call. No, looks like everyone's happy. So maybe, was it, I think, Daniel, did you have your hand up? Daniel McKay?
Yeah, Chris. Sorry, we've got questions here. Just unmuting.
Oh, we do have one from the room? Okay.
Sorry, did someone here have a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to just ask? The mic's to go.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks. The question is around the granularity of policies and events. One of the things I often find is that technical people, like myself and others, can drill down too far, or it's hard to sometimes know how far to go. Like with the command, it makes sense because you start with, well, with a command from a user, it makes sense because you can start with a real world thing. But inside, say, the aggregate or something, or whatever that system is, it's easy to maybe go through a nested set of more policies, more commands, more events. And sometimes it's hard to know how deep you go. Do you have any advice for how to do that in a room with people? Because sometimes it's hard to control.
Well, most of the time is not a rule. If you're expecting a rule from my side, no, you might be disappointed. Like I use a lot peer pressure. Like at the big picture level, you will clearly have people with different precision and granularity in mind. I mean, you might have board members and developers in the same room, and then peer pressure plays a role. Like board members, they might get with something which is very abstract but not actionable, while some technical people might say something like a button click, query executed, information fetched on JSON. Do we need to care about it? Well, most of the time, this doesn't even happen because people are looking to each other and they are self-correcting to make sure we are matching the implicit expectation of the audience. So I might get there and refine this if what I'm getting is a process with no errors, no friction, no mistakes, then why did you call me? I mean, it might be you're putting money into getting an external consultant. I need to see problems. So maybe we need to go at the deeper level to make sure that the contradictions are visible. But what I wanted to say is it's not necessary a facilitator responsibility. The team will probably kind of self-balance because they are trying to find the perfect balance. So I never established this up front. because there are so many extra signals leading to this. Like if you are in big picture, you have 12 or 15 meters of modeling space. Are you just gonna give me 5 abstract events, 5 stickies? I mean, sometimes it happened, and then everybody looked at the guy like, why is that? I mean, I gave you 15 meters for a reason. And okay, so should we expand? Well, probably yes. And other times, if we don't have enough space or not enough time, it's kind of self-balance, and you might need to drill into something. The same self-balancing also happens in the validation phase. Like somebody knows that there is something wrong at a given level, and the moment you tell the story at the level of granularity which is not making that part visible, somebody's going to correct it. So maybe there's the other little tool here helping you is the implicit sense of urgency of this workshop is happening now. We're not going to repeat it tomorrow. If there's something that you see that you don't like now is the time to stand up. And this is also one of the reasons why the in-person version works better, because when facilitating, you can capture also the little signals, like the boss is telling a very simplistic description of the flow, and then somebody in the audience just had this little way of looking to the ceiling in disapproval. I mean, you're not stopping the workshop and say like, oh, looks like somebody back there is disagreeing with the CEO. You don't do this. You don't expose them. But you would like to have a conversation with because looks like the story was not exactly the same. Or you might ask explicitly to the audience, like, is this the only way to tell a story? Do you have exception to this scenario? Is this the only scenario happening? And you might provide a safer place for a dissonant voice to be heard and also visualized. Sometimes you can do this in the workshop. Sometimes you need to be around and have this extra conversation later on. I probably told more than you were asking, but.
No, that's awesome. Thanks. I'm not sure how I'll convince a board member to come to the session just so I can get engineers to shut up, but I'll work on how to phrase that.
There's a couple of extra things here, like well, you can leverage food. You might not call a session, just like there's a free event with sandwiches. Make sure that they're smelling right. You might not be in a room. You might be in a place which is accessible. That's one more reason to make it happen in presence, but also remotely. You might say, like, I don't know exactly who to invite, but this was the result of our first round of exploration, and you can make it public. Like you're gonna be visibly wrong, so a good disclaimer is actually your favorite friend here. But saying something like, this is the result of the exploration session that we had on that day. If you know that something is missing or wrong, or if you have different information, feel free to comment or get in touch with us or join us on this Slack channel. So the first invitation is never going to be perfect, but can be used as a tool to discover who the real experts to be involved should be. And being visibly wrong is challenging on the psychological side, but very interesting as a tool to attract people explaining you what you should have done instead. So take a long breath, you add the notes, but then your model gets better.
Awesome. Thanks, Alberto. Is there anyone online who had any more questions for Alberto? Yeah, Srithi?
Hey, Alberto, thanks for the talk. This is just a quick question. Maybe I am exhibiting the digger personality here, but what do we do? Like, because this is mainly a time-bound event, right? So I'm wondering, how do you estimate how much time is going to be required for a particular exploration or an EventStorming session? Because you need to, at some point of time, also estimate, like I'm going to need this much time, and within this much time I know I'm going to come up with something which we can take forward and design and implement. So
Okay.
I'm just talking about the time.
No, that's a good thing. Like, so for big picture, there's a political time boxing, which is 1 day. And because I'm asking accessibility to the important people, it's very hard to ask 1 day and a half. And I mean, this is going to make it harder. So the result is, since I have no idea what I'm exploring, I'm not studying the business flow before the exploration. I just know that organizations, they normally have, I mean, I'm estimating the size like 10, 12, or maybe 15 meters, and then the team dynamics to get to a decent final state within 1 day. The thing that happens is the morning is kind of naturally time-bound, and also people getting tired or hungry plays a role, so we stop anyway, even if something is not yet happening. Well, the afternoon, when we do the validation, this is something where the team is pushing on the accelerator or on the brakes, because they all see that we have 12 meters to cover, and we only have 2 or 3 hours. If somebody's getting too detailed, the others started to look like, do we really need all of these details? And the answer is, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. I mean, people know what is the most intricate area, and you might still use the sticky, the hotspot as placeholders, like this area has been skipped for time reason, but it's probably not the most important area for the discussion we're having today. So I would say, big picture is self-regulated. In terms of engagement as a consultant, we offer something, usually something like 2 days plus 1. So I'm organizing the travel for 3 days, well, depending on what we discover at the end of day 1, we decide if I should be engaged for 1 more day or 2 more days. And well, worst case, I'm gonna go in a coffee shop and write something or code something. That might be the case as a consultant. When it comes to design session, be them process modeling or software design, well, in this case, really depends on the complexity of the flow. There's a lot that you can do in terms of facilitation, like half a day is a reasonable amount of time, but it might not be the good way to deal with the dynamics. Like in DDD Europe, I was running a workshop format that was called Rush to the Goal. And basically, I had less than 2 hours available, and I wanted to model a flow without knowing the domain expert. So in this scenario, I met in the morning the expert that was from a payment company. Okay, we modeled the payment system in less than 2 hours. I had a room full of 35 people, and I facilitated really aggressively, like basically using the paper roll as a stick and saying, like, can you please shut up? Otherwise, I'm not gonna finish. But because everybody was a driller, they wanted to give me alternatives. And what about this? What about this? Yes, but I want to finish. We managed to baseline the default case and the multi-currency purchase and operation, which was a good result. It was actually 8-9 meters at the aggregate level, but I was facilitating very aggressively. Like normally I would suggest take 2 half days for the first exploration, like something the afternoon of the first day and the morning of the following one, so that people will have the time to think about the problem with a clear mind. And also you need to balance extroverts and introvert people, and people which are quiet thinker, people who are visual thinker. Many times the hard part is dealing with the different personalities. So if the problem is tricky, I cannot guarantee we can find a perfect solution in 1 day. Usually a decent solution, yes, but I would leave space for collective thinking, solo thinking, and then another collective convergence later on, with the possibility of sleeping on the problem, having a shower, and so on.